Dear listeners, I want to start from the very heart with a wish for you to have endless happiness, love, and well-being. May each of your days be filled with light and warmth, like the rays of the morning sun penetrating the deepest corners of your soul. I address you as if you are close to me, because today I am going to share a story that changed my life forever. I remember that moment as if it happened just yesterday. The faint light of dawn seeped through the thick curtains as I, still in shock from the nightmares of the night, approached the bedroom door. My heart was pounding wildly, and thousands of thoughts raced through my mind. And then, in that fateful moment, I opened the door and saw him, naked. But he wasn't alone. In my memory, the icy chill of betrayal forever imprinted itself. Standing before me was a stranger, and I couldn't believe my eyes. That image, like a cinematic flash, unfolded in my mind, and I was on the verge of madness. In that second, the world around me crumbled, and all my dreams, hopes, and memories of happy days began to collapse like a house of cards under the force of an unrelenting wind. But to understand the depth of this pain, I need to go back to the days when our relationship began like a fairy tale. When I first met him, I thought I had found my destiny. His gaze, full of sincerity and tenderness, made me forget everything that had come before. We walked through the streets of the old town, laughed in the rain, and shared secrets under the rustling leaves. It seemed as if the universe itself had united our destinies in one magical moment. I remember how, in the early days of our relationship, every word, every touch was filled with magic. We dreamed of a future together, made plans, talked about a home, children, eternal love. But even in those happy moments, somewhere deep in my soul, a shadow of doubt was growing, a faint warning that I couldn't fully grasp. At first, everything seemed perfect. He was attentive, caring, and always knew how to lift my spirits even on the darkest days. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, I began to notice little things that had previously escaped my attention. He started coming home late from work. His phone became a sacred scroll he didn't want to show me. Sometimes I caught myself thinking that his words and looks had grown colder than before. These small details, like a fleeting, embarrassed glance, a quiet sigh when he was lost in thought, slowly began to fill a void I couldn't explain. One evening, as the rain gently tapped against the windows, I was left alone at home. The silence seemed to press down on me, as if nature itself sympathized with my loneliness. I found his personal notebook, forgotten on the table, and as I flipped through the pages, I noticed words that made me think. There were mentions of meetings, of people, of moments when his eyes sparkled in a new way, as if reflecting secret desires, hidden dreams he had never spoken of. These handwritten lines awakened a fear I had long tried to suppress. "You can't always know who's by your side," I whispered to myself, feeling every cell in my body fill with fear and pain. I tried to find a logical explanation, because all the years of our love had seemed flawless, and now I was faced with undeniable proof of betrayal. Every little thing, every unfinished conversation, every subtle detail became pieces of a huge puzzle I was horrified to understand. The picture he had been painting was just a mask hiding the truth. I remember our conversations when I, full of trust, shared my dreams and plans. His responses were careful, as if he were carefully choosing his words so as not to reveal what was growing inside him. Sometimes I thought I heard a hint of carelessness in his voice, a barely noticeable tone that hadn't been there before. And then, suddenly, like a bolt of lightning, I found myself in that very moment when reality and fantasy collided face to face. When I saw him with another woman, a storm of emotions erupted within me. My heart was torn to pieces, and tears streamed down my cheeks like rivers. Questions swirled in my head, questions I couldn't answer. How could he? What did I do wrong? Why now? These thoughts mixed with memories of our best days, and the pain of betrayal became unbearable. I felt like I had lost not just the person I loved, but a part of myself that believed in the purity and sincerity of feelings. The sensations were so vivid that I could even hear the sounds: the dripping of water from the faucet, the soft rustling of the curtains, the trembling beat of my heart. Everything around me seemed meaningless, as if the world had lost its colors, giving way to grey shadows of pain and loss. Every little thing, every shadow in the corner of the room became a reflection of my inner struggle, my despair. That night, I couldn't sleep. Lying in the dark, I revisited every moment, every word spoken over the past few months. Inside me, not just pain was born, but a whole storm that eventually grew into a determination to find the truth, even if it was bitter and cruel. I realized I could no longer live in a world of illusions where lies masqueraded as love. I had to make a choice: to accept the betrayal or find the strength to break free. The next morning, with a heavy heart and an inexplicable resolve, I began gathering evidence. Every little thing, messages on his phone, strange bills, missing items, became pieces of a puzzle I intended to complete down to the last detail. I talked to my friends, trying to find answers, seeking support in their experiences. One of them, my longtime friend Alena, said to me, "You deserve the truth, and if he's cheating, that's his problem, not yours. You must love yourself and not let anyone destroy your soul." Those words echoed in my head, reminding me that perhaps behind this pain lay a chance to find a new, stronger version of myself. But fear and doubt continued to haunt me. The fear of losing what had seemed sacred, the fear of facing an irreversible truth. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months of searching. I spent sleepless nights going over every event in my head, trying to find a logical thread that tied everything together. Every detail, no matter how insignificant, could be the key to unraveling the mystery. And then one day, as the rain tapped against the windows of my small town, I found something that finally shattered my illusions. In the pocket of his jacket, I found printed messages, a correspondence full of hints, flirtation, and outright passion with another woman. My heart clenched in pain, and my mind was overwhelmed with the feeling that I was becoming a spectator in my own life. At first, I couldn't believe my eyes. How could this have happened? All my years, filled with dreams of the future, had turned into deception, betrayal, and lies. Every word, Every promise he had made suddenly seemed like empty sounds, unable to quench the thirst for trust and love that had been so sacred to me. I felt like the world around me was collapsing, and I, like someone who had lost her footing, was teetering on the edge of an abyss. In those days, a real internal war was raging inside me. On one hand, I tried to hold on to the remnants of my faith in love. On the other, the pain and hurt demanded an immediate response. Every minute felt like an eternity, and time stretched on endlessly. I asked myself, why me? How do I go on? Can I ever forgive betrayal? These thoughts haunted me, giving me no peace. On one of those agonizing evenings, sitting in a dimly lit room and listening to the sound of a dripping faucet, I began an internal dialogue, trying to sort out my feelings. What do I do with this pain? I whispered, looking into the mirror as if searching for answers in my own reflection. Perhaps it's through this pain that you'll find strength, the echo of my soul quietly replied. But how do I accept that what I loved so much has turned out to be a lie? I asked, feeling tears roll down my cheeks. Those moments became a turning point. I realized that if I didn't figure things out now, my life would forever remain a prisoner of deception. I began collecting every piece of evidence, every little thing that could shed light on the truth. In my mind, an image was forming, not just of a victim, but of a woman ready to stand up and say, "Enough!" This resolve, born in the heart of pain, became the first step toward liberation. And so began my journey into the unknown. A journey where every encounter, every word, even the smallest details, took on new meaning. I knew that ahead of me lay not only reckoning, but also a chance to find a new me, strong, independent, and capable of loving again, no matter what. And now, in these gloomy days, when pain seeped into every cell of my body, I could no longer believe that the old me had ever existed. Before me opened a new, terrifying world where the truth, like bitter medicine, would have to become the guiding thread to healing. But I already knew no words, no tears would bring back the lost dreams. All that remained was to move forward, step by step, even if the road was paved with the thorns of betrayal. When dawn once again painted the sky with pink and golden hues, I stood on the threshold of change. I knew that this day would mark the starting point of a new chapter in my life, where fear would give way to courage and pain to strength born from suffering. Deep inside, I had already begun to believe, perhaps it was through this storm, that I could become the person I had always dreamed of being. I couldn't foresee how many trials lay ahead, but even then, a thought took root in my heart. If even this blow of fate can break me, then maybe I'm not worthy of love at all. But with each passing minute, I understood more and more that true strength lies in the ability to rise after a fall, in the ability to look pain in the eye and say, "I won't give up." At this moment, as my thoughts wrestled in the darkness, I could no longer stop the flood of memories, and my heart screamed, "This is not the end." I felt a spark of hope ignite deep within me, even if it was as faint as a tiny flame in a dark tunnel. Those first moments of realizing the betrayal became a turning point, a point of no return, after which everything that had come before disappeared, giving way to a new, harsh reality. It was then, standing in front of the closed bedroom door, that I realized my life would never be the same again. I felt everything inside me shifting, shattered dreams, a broken heart, and at the same time, a newfound determination to turn uncertainty into strength. That moment, filled with pain and fear, became the beginning of my long and difficult journey to myself. Though unknown trials still lay ahead, I already knew that each new day held the chance for rebirth, for new love, for myself and perhaps for someone else. With each passing day, the growing anxiety pressed harder on my soul. Outside, it seemed like nothing had changed. The usual rhythm of the city streets, time flowing relentlessly. But inside me, a storm raged, unceasing. I spent countless hours examining every digital trace, every forgotten text, every line in that cursed notebook that had once been the first sign of trouble. Every little thing turned into a bitter truth, and every detail I uncovered became proof that my world had been built on a shaky foundation of lies. In this state of constant tension, I realized it was time to act. The resolve I had nurtured deep within took shape and weight. I could no longer live as a prisoner of doubt and fear. I had to find out everything, once and for all. From that night, when the rain tapped on the roof, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would confront him face to face. Morning came, and with it, the realization of the inevitable. I mustered all my strength, threw on a light jacket, and headed to the house where, just a couple of years ago, only words of love and trust had been spoken. Every detail of the interior now echoed with memories, the photos on the walls, the cozy corners where we had once dreamed of the future. All of it seemed like silent witnesses to the storm of betrayal brewing inside me. I entered the living room, where an eerie silence now reigned, and with a heavy heart, I walked toward the kitchen. Suddenly, my phone rang. A message from Elena, my longtime friend, who had been my support and comfort from the very beginning of my ordeal. Her message read, "Remember, you deserve the truth and happiness. Don't be afraid to speak up and demand answers, because love cannot tolerate lies." Those words, like a quiet whisper of support, gave me strength. I knew I could no longer remain a prisoner of my own fears. Today, despite my trembling hands and the pounding pain in my chest, I had to ask the questions that burned inside me. A little later, as the sun's rays began to break through the clouds, I saw him, my husband. We found ourselves in the kitchen where domestic bliss had once reigned. Today, however, it became the stage for a dramatic confrontation. He stood by the dining table as if searching for words of justification. His gaze was tense, and I could see the turmoil within him, wavering between fear and hope for forgiveness. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady even though a storm raged inside me. He nodded, as if understanding that the moment of truth had come. We sat across from each other. His eyes sought excuses, mine sought the truth. The first moments of silence were heavy, as if an invisible field of resentment and unfulfilled dreams stretched between us. "I know what you've been feeling," he finally said, his voice trembling. "But believe me, it wasn't what you think. I wanted to protect us." His words sounded like hollow echoes of memories of past tenderness. His gaze changed, as if a shadow of fear and guilt flickered within. I could no longer hold back the pain that had built up inside me. Clenching my teeth, I pulled out a folder from my bag containing the printed messages, the evidence I had gathered alone. "Protect us," I coldly repeated, holding up the folder. "Then explain these messages, these conversations where you seek comfort in the arms of another woman. Every line is a blow to my heart. How could you do this to me?" His face twisted in pain and embarrassment, and in that moment, I saw in his eyes not love, but the fear of losing what he had once called sacred. His attempts to justify himself became more and more faltering, as if each phrase cast a shadow of the truth he couldn't hide. It was a mistake," he stammered, trying to compose himself. "I never thought it would turn into something more. I was lonely, and I sought comfort, but I never meant to hurt you." His words sounded dull, like echoes of long-gone promises. Inside me, rage burned, not just because of the betrayal, but because I had trusted someone who seemed to know me better than anyone else. Tears began to stream down my cheeks, but they were not just tears of sadness, but of anger and disappointment. "Lonely?" I interrupted him, my voice filled with pain and anger. "How could you seek comfort outside our marriage? I gave you everything I could, and you chose to betray me. Tell me, how could you do this when we were building our future together?" He tried to find the words, but they vanished into the air, as if dissolving into an inexpressible void. Every movement, every word of his seemed like a lie, stretched taut like a string ready to snap at the slightest touch of truth. He began, but I didn't let him finish. I felt an unstoppable force rising within me, and the words that had once been filled with tears turned into a cold accusation. "Enough!" I shouted, silencing everything around me. "I'm tired of listening to your excuses. I won't tolerate the lies that have destroyed everything we had. You didn't just betray our relationship. You betrayed me, your wife, the person I trusted completely." In the silence that followed, filled with the echo of my words, I felt his breathing quicken, and his eyes filled with a mix of fear and bitterness. I didn't seek revenge, but I demanded honesty. Every second of this conversation left an indelible mark on my soul. "Do you think you can fix everything with one conversation?" I continued, looking him straight in the eye. "But the truth is already out, and I can't live in a world of illusions anymore. I demand answers. I demand the truth. And if you're not ready to face it, I'm ready to walk away and start over." The moments stretched into eternity. The air was heavy with unresolved questions and pain that slowly but surely destroyed what remained of our feelings. In that moment, I realized I could no longer remain a prisoner of empty promises and hollow words. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, as if understanding that his words no longer held any weight. "I'm so sorry." His apologies sounded empty, and I felt a final resolve take root within me, to stop being a victim. Remembering all the sleepless nights filled with fear and doubt, I stood up, feeling every cell in my body fill with new strength. "I'm sorry," I repeated, but this time not to him, but to myself. "I'm sorry for the version of me that allowed you to destroy everything that was dear. Today, I stop looking in the mirror with pain and tears. Today, I begin a new chapter, a chapter where I define my own destiny." With those words, I took the evidence I had gathered and, as if looking back at the shattered past one last time, walked out of the house. Beyond the threshold, the cold morning air greeted me as if whispering, "You're free." Step by step, I walked down the street, feeling the weight of betrayal gradually give way to the lightness of resolve. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was Elena. "You made the right choice," her voice, full of support and confidence, said. "Now your life begins, and I'll always be by your side." My friend's words warmed me like a blanket on a cold day. I knew challenges lay ahead, but now I wasn't alone. A new faith was growing within me, a faith that every pain, every betrayal could become a stepping stone to finding my true self. I stopped at a crossroads where the fates of people intersected and for a moment wondered, what next? Every thought, every moment was filled with meaning. I had to let go of the illusions that love was always perfect. Today, I learned that true love begins with respect and honesty, with love for oneself. At that moment, I made a decision. I would no longer live in the shadow of the past. I would no longer let anyone control my happiness. Every step I took on this new path reminded me that even the deepest wounds could give rise to a strength capable of illuminating the darkness. I sat on a nearby park bench where autumn leaves danced in the wind and began writing my thoughts in a journal. Every line, every letter, became symbols of my liberation. I wasn't seeking excuses or paths to revenge. My goal was clear. Healing, renewal, the beginning of a new life where pain would turn into wisdom and betrayal into a lesson. The sun slowly rose over the horizon, painting the world in warm hues of hope. I looked into the eyes of this new day and knew that ahead of me lay challenges, but also bright moments capable of restoring my faith in life. This was my first step toward feeling the taste of true love again. For myself, for my dreams, and perhaps for someone new who would value me not for illusions, but for my true essence. Before leaving, I called Elena and said, "Thank you for being by my side, for supporting me in this difficult moment. Today, I've begun a new chapter of my life, and I no longer need to fear the truth. I no longer need to cry in the dark. I've found the strength to say, 'Enough.'" Her response was soft and comforting. "You're brave. Your pain is not the end, but the beginning of something new. And know that every step you take brings you closer to the light, even if the path seems thorny now." I hung up, feeling the weight of resentment slowly lift from my shoulders. There was no longer room for fear within me. I realized that it was in these moments, when everything falls apart, that true strength is born. Strength capable of forging a new path. Today, I stopped being the one who always forgives and hides her pain. Today, I became the master of my own destiny. With that thought, I stood up and, looking at my reflection in the nearest window, saw not a broken woman, but one ready to rise from the ashes of betrayal and find a new life filled with sincerity and love. Let the past remain a bitter memory, and let the future become a canvas on which I paint my destiny. And so, walking down the street, I felt the raindrops begin to fall from the sky, as if symbolizing purification. Each drop was like a small promise, a promise of a new beginning, a promise of freedom from pain. With each step, I left behind all the moments when the world seemed unbearably cruel, and moved closer to understanding that true happiness begins with self-love. This encounter, this conversation. It all became the starting point in my fight for truth, for my freedom, for my soul. I knew that ahead of me there would still be days when the wounds would bleed and nights when the pain would return like a restless ghost. But I was ready to accept my fate, ready to fight for my happiness, ready to find the strength to start anew. With that thought, I stepped into the unknown, knowing that it was here, in this moment, that my true freedom began. Let there be many more trials and tears ahead. I'm no longer afraid. Today, I've chosen a path where light meets darkness, and I've realized, even if the world crumbles, I can rebuild it brick by brick with faith in a better future. I stepped out onto the deserted street, feeling the cold morning air burn my cheeks, as if reminding me of the cruel truth that had just shattered my heart. My feet, as if guided by an unseen force, carried me along the quiet streets, where every building, every shadow became a reflection of my inner world, a world filled with pain, but also a quiet, hidden hope for rebirth. For a moment, I stopped by a small park where I had once spent hours dreaming of the future, unaware of the impending tragedy. Today, there was a special atmosphere, a light mist slowly rising over the paths, and the rustling of fallen leaves seemed to whisper words of encouragement. Sitting on an old wooden bench, I took out the notebook that had become my saving tool and began writing down my thoughts. Every line was filled with pain, but also with a sincere desire to understand myself, to forgive, and to find the strength for a new beginning. I remembered how just yesterday my hands had trembled with anger and sadness, how every thought had swirled in my head like an unrelenting whirlpool. But now, in the silence of the park, everything felt different. I allowed myself to feel every beat of my heart, every tear, realizing that it was through this pain that a new life was being born. "Why is it so hard to forgive myself?" I whispered, trying to find answers to the questions that had been tormenting me for days. "Maybe that's the path to freedom," the echo of my inner voice quietly replied. "To accept the pain, understand it, and let it go." At that moment, an elderly woman with a gentle gaze and a warm smile approached me. She stopped, as if sensing that I was at a crossroads in my life. "Dear," she began, her voice soft but confident, "I see in your eyes the same pain I experienced many years ago. You want to run away, to forget the past, but remember, true liberation doesn't come from running away, but from forgiveness. Forgiving yourself, forgiving the one who caused you pain, and most importantly, forgiving fate for all the trials." Her words touched my heart. I couldn't help but recall my sleepless nights when I wrapped myself in the cold embrace of loneliness, trying to understand when everything had gone wrong. Her gaze said, "You're not alone. Every wound is the beginning of a new chapter." I wanted to ask, "How did you manage to forgive and let go of the pain?" But before I could, she gently placed her hand on my shoulder and continued, "Sometimes life tests us so we can understand how strong we are. Don't be cruel to yourself. Let time heal the wounds, and within yourself, find that spark that can light up even the darkest corners of your soul." Her words, like a quiet prayer, enveloped me in warmth. I felt something new slowly awakening in my chest. A confidence that despite the deception and betrayal, I deserved happiness. We sat silently on the bench, and the wind, playing with the fallen leaves, created a melody of forgiveness and rebirth. A few minutes later, I gathered my strength, as if deciding to take the first step toward my new life. I stood up, thanked the stranger, and continued my journey down the streets, where every step felt heavy, but also filled with new resolve. In my mind, fragments of memories still swirled. My husband's voice, his silent apology, and those looks filled with fear and regret. But now, they were just shadows of the past. Shadows I had to say goodbye to. In the days that followed, I immersed myself in self-reflection and inner work. Every morning began with a walk along the waterfront, where the fresh sea air washed away the remnants of yesterday's pain. I visited a small cafe, where over a cup of strong coffee, I wrote down my thoughts, made plans, and dreamed of a future free from the chains of the past. In these morning rituals, I found solace and inspiration. One day at the cafe, I met a man whose sincerity and calm demeanor immediately caught my attention. His name was Alexander, and his warm voice and wise eyes reminded me that even after the hardest trials, new light can appear in life. We struck up a conversation, and without fully realizing the significance of this dialogue, I shared part of my story with him. He listened without interrupting, his eyes expressing sympathy and understanding. "You're incredibly strong," he said softly when I finished. "Many would have broken under such a burden, but I see in you a spark that can light up the whole world. Allow yourself to believe in love again, not the love that was, but a new, genuine, and sincere love." These words, spoken with genuine care, gave me the strength not only to believe in myself, but also to look to the future with hope. I realized that true healing comes when you stop clinging to the past and allow yourself to live in the present. In each day, in each new encounter, I sought a glimmer of the light that had once been stolen by pain and betrayal. In the evenings, returning home, I settled into a small corner of my apartment where I had placed a few cozy candles and played soft music. These moments became my ritual of forgiveness and restoration. I reread my notes, meditated on every word, trying to understand how important each moment was on the path to myself. I reflected on how betrayal had opened my eyes to the true meaning of love. Love for myself, for my dreams, for my inner world. Sometimes, when night fell over the city, I felt the pain awaken again as memories of past days troubled my soul. But now I knew I could face that pain head-on, without letting it destroy me. I allowed myself to cry, to scream, to write down everything that haunted me. And with each tear, I felt the storm within me subside, giving way to clarity and peace. Re-evaluating the past became not just a necessity for me, but a creative process in which I reshaped my destiny. I started attending yoga classes, signed up for a creative writing workshop. All of this helped me feel again that I wasn't just a victim of circumstances, but the creator of my own life. Each new experience, each encounter with people whose stories resembled mine, strengthened my belief that life could be beautiful if I learned to accept and love myself. One of the key moments in my rebirth was a conversation with my longtime friend Elena, with whom I spoke almost every evening. One day, after an especially emotional day, I shared my feelings with her. Elena, I've realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain, but about freeing yourself from it. I no longer want to live in the grip of bitterness and resentment. I need to forgive not only him, but also myself for allowing this pain to control my life. Elena, whose voice was always filled with wisdom and kindness, replied, "You're already on the path to true freedom, dear. Forgive yourself for the mistakes of the past, because it's through them that you've become stronger. Let every wound be a monument to your growth, and every trial a step toward a new life. Remember, forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself." These words became a manifesto for my new life. I began to devote more time to myself. Walks in nature, reading inspiring books, activities that brought me joy. Gradually, the pain seemed to recede, giving way to calm and confidence. I learned not just to survive, but to live, discovering qualities within myself that I hadn't known existed. Each new day brought its own challenges, sudden memories, nightmares, moments when it seemed like the past was ready to take revenge. But now I knew. Strength lies not in forgetting, but in accepting and using pain as fuel for growth. I began to gather my thoughts like mosaic pieces, assembling them into a picture of a future where I was a strong, independent, and free woman. Several months passed, and I began to notice that something inside me had changed. Looking in the mirror no longer brought tears of despair, but instead reflected a person who had weathered the storm and emerged renewed. I understood that the past would always be a part of me, but it would no longer define my future. Every scar on my heart became proof that I had survived the worst and found my strength. On one clear autumn evening, sitting in a cozy chair with a cup of tea and an open notebook, I wrote a few lines that later became my motto. I choose to live despite the pain. I choose to forgive despite the betrayal. I choose to love myself and believe in the light that will always find its way through the darkness. These lines became a symbol of my new beginning. I felt that my life wasn't a chain of random events, but the result of my own choices. And though many challenges still lay ahead, I was no longer afraid of them. Now I knew every blow of fate tempers the soul, turning pain into strength and fear into the courage to act. Sometimes at night, when the city slept, I sat by the window, watching the stars, and thought about how much moments of solitude mattered. When you meet yourself. It was in those moments that I felt I was on the threshold of change, that every star was a reminder of the infinite possibilities life offers. I learned to listen to my inner voice, which told me that every new dawn was a chance to start over. Weeks passed, and I grew more confident. Moments of sadness still visited me from time to time, but I had learned to let them go, like light feathers carried away by the wind. I understood that my pain wasn't a sentence, but just a stage on the path to becoming the person I had always dreamed of being. One evening, Alexander called me. His voice, warm and caring, made my heart beat a little faster again. We agreed to meet at a small, cozy cafe where over a cup of tea and soft music, we could forget about the world. Sitting at the table, I felt as if a small world had unfolded around us. A world where deception and pain didn't exist, where only sincerity and understanding could fill the void. "I've wanted to tell you for a while," Alexander began, looking into my eyes, "that your story is inspiring. You've been through fire and water, and I see a new star rising within you. Your words, your strength. It all reminds me that true rebirth is possible if you allow yourself to be vulnerable and honest." His words made me smile. In that moment, I realized, despite all the trials, life goes on, and there's always room for new encounters, for new love. Not necessarily romantic, but love for myself, for the world around me, and for every little thing that makes us alive. Our conversation lasted late into the evening. We talked about dreams, about how important it is not to give up, even when it feels like the whole world is against you. Alexander shared his own losses and victories, and I felt that something more than friendship was growing between us. But the most important thing that evening was that I began to see in him a reflection of the strength that now pulsed within my soul. Walking home under the starry sky, I felt lightness and calm fill me. Every star twinkling in the distance seemed like a sign that a bright future awaited me. I no longer felt the pain as I once had, and every step I took in the dark of night brought me closer to the dawn of a new life. On those long nights, when my thoughts drifted into infinity, I understood more and more that true forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past, but about accepting it as an integral part of yourself. It teaches us to be human, to be strong, and most importantly, to love ourselves no matter what. Today, I'm no longer the woman who cried alone, afraid to hear the sound of falling rain. I've become the person who can face any storm with her head held high and an open heart. And though the road to complete healing isn't over, each new day gives me the confidence that I can rebuild my life, brick by brick, with love and faith in the best. If you, dear listeners, are experiencing moments of loss and betrayal, if your hearts are filled with pain, know this: within each of us lies an indomitable strength. Allow yourself to cry, allow yourself to feel, but never forget, after the darkest night, dawn always comes. Love yourself, forgive yourself, and believe that after every storm, there is a light capable of illuminating even the coldest corners of the soul. From the first rays of dawn, I knew, today, everything would change. The sun, breaking through the light clouds, gave warmth and confidence, as if reminding me that each new day is a chance to start life anew. I stood by the window of my small apartment, watching the golden rays paint the world in shades of hope. Everything around me breathed renewal. The quiet rustle of the street, the slow movement of passers-by, the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee from a nearby cafe. It was in that moment that I felt I was finally ready to leave the demons of the past behind. These months of struggle, tears, and slow healing had transformed me into a person I no longer recognized. Every beat of my heart, every tear on my face had become a brick on the path to a new life, where there would be no more room for deception and pain. I remembered those sleepless nights when thoughts swirled in a whirlpool of suffering, when every morning began with the pain of loss, and every evening with the agonizing question, how do I go on? But now, all of that seemed like a distant echo. no longer capable of awakening fear in me. Over the past few months, I had learned to forgive, not to forget, but to free myself from the weight of the past. I forgave not only the one who had once broken our sacred promise, but also myself, for the mistakes I had made, for the moments of weakness and doubt. In the mirror, I saw not a broken woman, but a strong, renewed soul, ready to face each new day with an open heart. One day, a few weeks after the decisive meeting with my husband, fate gave me one last, almost symbolic gift. I was walking through the streets of the old city centre, where every alley breathed memories of times when I still believed in fairy tale love. Suddenly, I saw him, my ex-husband. He was standing near the entrance to a small bookstore, thoughtfully looking at the display. Our eyes met, and in his gaze, I saw a shadow of regret, perhaps the realization that he had lost something priceless. But I no longer felt the pain that had once pierced my heart. Instead, a quiet voice of gratitude sounded within me, for the lessons, for the trials, for the chance to become myself. "Hi," I said softly, approaching him. And in that greeting, there was no resentment, only a calm farewell to the past. He lowered his gaze, and as if searching for words, whispered, I want to apologize for everything, for the pain I caused." I paused for a moment, remembering all those nights when I had struggled with my own insecurities and fears. Back then, I couldn't have imagined that one day I would meet his gaze, and that meeting would be the final page in the book of our relationship. I took a deep breath and replied, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry we had to part so painfully, but I'm grateful that this pain made me stronger. We've both been through a lot, and now I believe that each of us deserves happiness in our own way." His voice carried a note of resignation, and I understood that forgiveness isn't weakness, but the highest form of courage. Our paths had diverged, like two parallel lines that had once crossed, but now moved in different directions. And I realized that sometimes, to move forward, you need to forgive not only the other person, but also yourself, to let go of everything that has held you captive to old resentments. After that meeting, I returned to my favorite park, where there was no longer sadness, but only a quiet joy in realizing that I had found my inner peace. Sitting on the familiar bench under an old oak tree, I took out my notebook and began writing the final lines of my journey. Every word, every letter became proof that even the deepest wounds can give rise to new meaning in life. I wrote about how pain transforms into wisdom, how fear gives way to courage, and how doubt turns into confidence. I wrote that now my life was a canvas on which I chose the colors, strokes, and lines. Remembering everything that had happened over the past few months, I realized that true rebirth begins when you learn to accept life as it is, with all its joys and sorrows. I remembered the first tears shed in the dark nights and smiled. They had become the fuel for my inner flame, which now burned brighter than ever. My heart was no longer a prisoner of resentment, but a place where endless love lived, for myself, for life, for each new day. Time passed, and soon a new person entered my life. Alexander, whom I had met during the days when my inner world was beginning to bloom again. His sincerity, kindness, and quiet confidence became not just a comfort to me, but a true reflection of what the world could be when ruled by love and honesty. We spent long evenings talking about dreams, about the past that no longer held us captive, and about a future full of possibilities. He told me that everyone deserves a second chance, that forgiveness is a bridge connecting two shores, and that love is a force capable of working miracles. One evening, as the rain poured outside and the firelight danced in our small garden, we sat together, and I heard his quiet words. "You're the embodiment of the courage I've been searching for so long. You have so much strength, so much tenderness. You've changed your life, and I believe that together we can create something amazing." Those words enveloped me in warmth, and I realized that it was time not only to forgive, but to love again, without fearing the pain of the past. I looked into his eyes and saw the reflection of my new self, confident, strong, beautiful, and free. And in that moment, I felt everything fall into place. All the lessons, all the trials, all the tears had led me to this bright moment. That evening, sitting on the porch, I opened my journal and wrote the final lines of my journey. Today, I let go of everything that held me captive. Today, I choose freedom, love, and a new life. Let the past remain just a memory, and let the future be filled with light. I'm grateful for every pain, for every lesson. They've made me who I am. And I believe that only the best days lie ahead. These lines became my manifesto, my promise to myself and to the world that I would no longer be a victim of circumstances, but the creator of my own destiny. Every time I read them, I felt a spark within me, a reminder that life is an incredible journey full of surprises, joys, and of course, trials that only strengthen the spirit. And now, addressing you, dear listeners, I want to say, love yourself, forgive, and believe that every pain can become a stepping stone to a new, brighter future. Let my story be not just a tale of betrayal and pain, but also a source of inspiration, a reminder that even after the darkest night, dawn always comes. If this story resonates with you, if you feel that these words can help you find strength in difficult times, stay with me and subscribe to my channel. Here, in every new story, I share a piece of my soul, believing that together we can find light even where darkness reigns. I'm grateful to each of you for being with me on this long and difficult journey. May your lives be filled with love, happiness, and endless faith in yourselves. For only by loving ourselves can we love the world around us and bring joy to those who are close. With this, my story comes to an end, and a new chapter of my life begins. I move forward with my head held high, with a pure heart, and with the confidence that every loss, every trial has made me stronger. May each of you find your truth and achieve the freedom that is so essential for happiness. Thank you for sharing these moments with me. May love and light always be with you. This was my journey, a journey of pain, overcoming, and rebirth. I hope my confession has become not just a story for you, but a true source of inspiration and strength. Stay with us, subscribe to the channel, and remember, even after the longest night, dawn always comes. And in each new day, hope for a better future grows.